Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today, we're going to crack the code on something that is, honestly, a cornerstone skill for anyone who works with data: exploratory data analysis, or EDA for short. If you've ever stared at a massive spreadsheet and just felt completely lost, then this one's for you. So let's grab our virtual magnifying glass and dive right in. You know, every single data set, no matter how messy or complicated it looks on the surface, has a story to tell. It's just full of hidden patterns, surprising connections, and secrets that are just waiting for someone to find them. So the real question is, how do you actually get it to talk? Well, that's exactly where EDA steps in. The official definition is that it's the process of visualizing data to understand its main features, find patterns, and so on. But really, it's about getting to know your data. It's not about proving some big hypothesis right out of the gate. It's about just getting a feel for what's really going on under the hood. And I gotta say, that is the perfect way to think about it. So for the rest of our time here, forget being just an analyst. You are now a detective. Your data set? That's the crime scene. And EDA? Well, that's your step-by-step investigative process. You're on the hunt for clues, you're identifying suspects, and you're piecing together the whole story. So here's our game plan for this investigation. We'll start by defining the case. Then we'll uncover the motive. After that, we'll open up our toolkit. Then we'll walk through the investigation itself. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with the final report. Sound good? Let's get to it. All right, first up, the case. So what problem are we actually trying to solve when we sit down to do data exploration? Our mission, really, is to bring order to chaos. We walk into this chaotic crime scene, which is our raw data, and through careful, methodical analysis, we turn it into a crystal clear story. And not just any story, but one that leads to real, actionable insights. You know, every great detective story needs a motive, right? So what's our motive here? Why is this first step so darn important? I mean, why can't we just skip ahead and start building those cool, complex models? Well, it really boils down to 5 absolutely critical reasons. And trust me, skipping this step is like a detective showing up to a crime scene and deciding not to look for any clues. You're just setting yourself up for failure. Let's break it down. By understanding the dataset's basic features, you're just getting the lay of the land. When you identify patterns and relationships, that's when you start seeing how the clues connect. Detecting errors and what we'll call unusual suspects, or outliers, make sure your evidence is solid. And all of this helps you select the most important features and choose the right tools to ultimately solve the case. Okay, let's talk about the toolkit. No detective shows up to a crime scene empty-handed, and neither should you. These are the core methods we use to interrogate our data and make it talk. In our data detective toolkit, there are 3 main methods we use to really, examine the evidence from all the different angles. First on the list is something called univariate analysis. Just think of it like this. You're picking up one single clue, one variable, and putting it under the magnifying glass. You study it all by itself. You might use a histogram, for example, to see the age distribution of your customers. All right, next up, we've got bivariate analysis. Now, this is where things get interesting because you're starting to connect the dots. You take 2 clues, 2 variables, and you see if they're related. A classic tool here is a scatter plot. Does one thing go up when another goes down? That's what you're looking for. And finally, the big one, multivariate analysis. This is like taking a step back and looking at the whole crime scene all at once. You're not just looking at 1 or 2 clues. You're seeing how everything interacts. It's definitely more advanced, but this is often where the most profound insights are hiding. Okay, so we've got our motive, we've got our toolkit packed. Now it is time to start the actual investigation. And a good investigation follows a very clear 8-step process, so we don't miss a thing. And listen, this part is so important. You can't just wander around the crime scene hoping to trip over a clue. A great investigation is structured. It's disciplined. Following these steps is what makes sure your analysis is rock solid. So, phase 1 is all about setting up the case file. First, you got to understand the problem. What are you even trying to solve here? Second, you bring in the data and just give it a quick once-over. Check its size, look for obvious errors. Third, you deal with any missing data, the gaps in the witness testimony. And fourth, you start exploring the basic characteristics with simple stats, like the mean and median. All right, now phase 2 is where we really start to find the story. Step 5, you might need to transform your data a bit to make it easier to work with. Then, step 6, my favorite part, you start visualizing everything with charts and plots to see the relationships. Step 7 is where you handle those unusual suspects, the outliers. And finally, the most critical step of all, step 8, you communicate what you found. So let's drill down on that for a second, handling those unusual suspects. When you find an outlier, you've basically got two choices. If it's obviously a typo, a clear data entry error, you might just remove it. But what if it's a real data point that's just extreme? In that case, you might adjust it or transform it so it doesn't throw off your whole investigation. And that brings us to the grand finale, what is arguably the most important piece of the whole puzzle, the final report. Because let's be honest, what good is solving the case if you can't clearly explain to everyone what you discovered? Yeah, and this quote right here, it just hits the nail on the head. Look, the whole point of this isn't just to solve the mystery for yourself, it's about making a real impact. It's about getting other people to understand what you found so they can actually act on it. So, what goes into a killer funnel report? Well, you gotta state your goals right up front. Use those awesome charts and graphs you made to support your findings. You have to clearly highlight the biggest insights, be honest about any limitations you ran into, and finally, suggest what the next steps should be. And there you have it. That's exploratory data analysis in a nutshell. It's really about shifting your mindset. You're not just looking at a spreadsheet, you're looking at a story that's dying to be told. The only question left is, are you ready to listen? Thanks so much for joining me.